Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephanie Cox. Here are today's top stories. The Senate impeachment trial of former President Trump is due to start next month. That's even as 45 senators vote that the case is unconstitutional. Senator Rand Paul, who forced the vote, called the trial dead on arrival. The Biden administration's order freezing deportations has been temporarily blocked. The move comes after Texas sued the administration over the order. The Senate Minority Leader has a better chance of keeping the ability to filibuster. This because two Democrats broke away from their party, balancing out the Senate. The Senate confirms President Biden's top diplomat to head the State Department. Antony Blinken will be the most senior cabinet member and fourth in the line of presidential succession. And Twitter introduces a new feature to its platform. Some users will now be able to flag other users' posts for giving out what they deem to be misinformation. The Senate trial on Trump's impeachment is delayed until next month. President Biden says Trump's impeachment trial needs to happen, although he admits it's not likely Trump will be convicted. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has the details.
It's the first time a non-sitting president will face such a trial, and some Republicans are urging against the lawfulness of holding a trial for a former president.
Private citizens don't get impeached. Impeachment is for removal from office, and the accused here has already left office.
Senator Rand Paul forced the Senate to vote on whether or not it's constitutional for the Senate to hold a trial of a private citizen, since Trump is no longer in office. 45 senators have voted that the trial is unconstitutional, so it's unlikely the Senate will impeach Trump. They need at least 17 Republican senators to successfully convict him. Immediately after today's votes, Senator Rand Paul wrote on Twitter that the trial is dead on arrival at the Senate. The trial is set for next month, but the U.S. Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts won't preside over it. He says he's not interested in presiding over another Senate impeachment trial against former President Trump. Some expect that Democratic Senator Patrick Leahy will chair the Senate trial instead. Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
And newly elected Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene tells NTD why her first major action in office is to file articles of impeachment against President Biden. Greene's articles accuse Biden of abusive power when he served as vice president. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has the story.
One example she gives is the 2016 Ukraine Burisma incident, when Biden threatened to withhold $1 billion in foreign aid if Ukraine leaders did not dismiss an anti-corruption prosecutor who was looking into Burisma, which was an energy company where Biden's son, Hunter Biden, was on the board of directors.
No matter what political party they belong to, we cannot have someone in that type of position of power where they're willing to do special favors and deals just to help enrich their family's business dealings.
A September report by the Senate Homeland Security and Finance Committees found that Hunter Biden made millions worth of questionable transactions with Chinese nationals connected to the Chinese communist regime and military.
And so this is why I ran for Congress. I'm not interested in playing the same old Republican playbook. It's not working. We're not holding Democrats accountable. So what I'm bringing to the table is I'm tired of campaign promises, and I want Republicans to take the gloves off.
And the representative claims that it's not just Hunter Biden who's responsible for these alleged corrupt business dealings. She's accusing President Biden and the First Lady of being directly involved with the corruption. That's based on statements made by Hunter Biden's former business partner, Tony Bobulinski. He suggested Joe Biden was involved in some of the deals. Joe Biden has repeatedly denied that he was ever involved with his family's business dealings. Some wonder what Representative Greene hopes to get out of her attempt to impeach Biden, since if successful, it would lead to Vice President Kamala Harris taking office.
Kamala Harris is guilty of exactly what they impeached President Trump for, and I intend to hold her accountable for her actions as well.
She pointed to the vice president's promotion of the Minnesota Freedom Fund. The money from that fund was reportedly used to bail out protesters who were arrested for violent offenses during Black Lives Matter protests over the summer. Representative Greene's name stands alone on the articles of impeachment for now, but she says she's not discouraged by that. She says she's trying to encourage other representatives to be more bold and show the American people and the Democratic Party that Republicans do have a backbone. Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
Texas is victorious after the state's attorney general took the Biden administration to court over an executive order freezing deportations. NTD's Grace Coulter has the story.
U.S. District Judge Drew Tipton, an appointee of former President Trump, is issuing a temporary restraining order blocking Biden's 100-day deportation freeze for 14 days across the country. This after Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton sued the Biden administration over the policy. Paxton hailed the victory on Twitter, saying, "Within 6 days of Biden's inauguration, Texas has halted his illegal deportation freeze." He also called Biden's executive order a seditious left-wing insurrection. Paxton said last week that the DHS failed to consult with Texas before making its immigration policy changes, as is required per an agreement between Texas and the agency. The Biden administration has proposed a number of changes to immigration policy, including a plan to give citizenship to around 11 million undocumented immigrants. Last week, Biden also signed an executive order halting all U.S.-Mexico border wall construction. Texas Representative Henry Cuellar says the construction will stop Tuesday night. During Trump's term in office, Democrats and immigration activists often filed lawsuits attempting to obstruct his immigration policies. With Paxton's lawsuit leading the way, it's likely that Republicans may do the same, especially with hundreds of judges appointed by the former president. Grace Coulter, NTD News.
Federal prosecutors say they're preparing to charge people with sedition related to the Capitol breach on January 6th. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more on that announcement.
Some people who breached the Capitol on January 6 could face up to 20 years in federal prison. That's according to U.S. District Attorney Michael Sherwin, who says over 400 cases have been opened related to the event.
Yes, we are working on those cases, and I think the results will bear fruit very soon.
During the press call, Sherwin also said 150 people have been hit with federal charges. The assistant in charge of FBI's Washington field office says people have turned in their own friends and family.
Some of you would recognize that this was such an egregious incident that you've turned in your own friends and family members. We know that those decisions are often painful, but you picked up the phone because it was the right thing to do. We're grateful you made that choice.
The FBI says they've arrested approximately 35 people, with more being identified and charged every day. A DOJ press release shows that Brandon Strzok, founder of the anti-Democratic Party Walk Away campaign, was arrested on Monday. He is being accused of interfering with an officer during civil disorder and a number of other crimes. We contacted the Walk Away campaign for comment, but they didn't get back to us before airtime. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
Thousands of National Guard members remain in the Capitol and will stay there until March. NTD's Grace Coulter speaks with a lieutenant to get his take on the continued military presence after inauguration.
13,000 National Guard members remain in D.C., with the number dropping to 7,000 by the end of the week. And according to Acting Secretary of the Army, John Whitley, at least 5,000 troops are set to stay until mid-March. This due to FBI warnings about possible unrest. The FBI also warned of potential attacks taking place on January 20th, but none were attempted. Lieutenant Stephen Rogers is calling the move unprecedented and unnecessary.
The National Guard is to be used to supplement police, to augment police when they're unable to deal with the attacks that are taking place in their cities. So right now, I can only say this is political. What kind of message is being sent? It's not a good message for our world leaders. It's not a good message for the American people.
Lieutenant Rogers is a retired U.S. Navy and police officer who also served on the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force. He pointed to the riots taking place in cities like Tacoma, Washington, where Antifa is attacking public and private property. He questioned why the National Guard isn't being sent there.
Well, what's more perplexing is the fact that as our troops are in Washington, D.C., there are cities on the West Coast that are burning down. Why isn't the National Guard being called there? I can only conclude that this is now all politics.
He says that at a time when a large number of Americans are concerned about communist infiltration, the sight of troops in the Capitol is not healthy for America.
And the optics of troops in our capital doesn't bid well with the American people when there is a concern about a socialist communist agenda being advanced by some in this country.
The lieutenant also says the vetting of the National Guard was unprecedented and called it a political litmus test, since even the FBI itself said there wasn't evidence of a planned insider attack, and the vetting was only a precautionary measure.
Hopefully we're not going to see a rerun of that, but if we do, it's only causing more suspicion about who is influencing our government leaders.
Lieutenant Rogers says that America is in an ideological war and that there's a war against free speech. He says the enemy is not other American people, but forces like the Chinese Communist Party that seek to subvert America. Grace Coulter, NTD News.
It looks like Congress won't lose its ability to filibuster for now. The Senate Minority Leader says 2 needed Democrats have taken his side, balancing out the Senate. NTD's Miguel Moreno has that story.
Senator Majority Leader Chuck Schumer told MSNBC on Monday that he wouldn't consider the Republicans organizing a resolution that would protect the filibuster endorsed by Senator Mitch McConnell.
We've told McConnell no on the organizing resolution, and that's that.
But now it appears McConnell balanced the Senate scales, saying he got 2 Democrats to side with the minority.
Rather than relying on the Democratic leader, I took the discussion directly to his members. Basic arithmetic now ensures that there are not enough votes to break the rule.
McConnell says they can now have a 50-50 power-sharing pact on Senate rules. To some Democrats, the filibuster is an outdated tool that Republicans can use to fight off President Biden's agenda. Basically, if a senator filibusters, a 60-vote majority is necessary to end debate on a bill as long as they keep talking. It can be used to block the Senate from voting on a bill. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
Senator Ted Cruz is trying to put term limits on lawmakers to hold career politicians accountable. Here are the details.
Senator Ted Cruz and other Republicans have reintroduced an amendment to the Constitution to limit the number of terms lawmakers can legally serve. It would limit senators to 2 6-year terms and representatives to 2 3-year terms. Cruz said, "The rise of political careerism in today's Congress is a sharp departure from what the founders intended for our federal governing bodies. I have long called for this solution for the brokenness of Washington, D.C., and I will continue fighting to hold career politicians accountable." He hopes it could give more oversight and accountability to people on Capitol Hill. He said, "Every year, Congress spends billions of dollars on giveaways for the well-connected. Washington insiders get taxpayer money, and members of Congress get reelected, all while the system fails the American people." Other Republicans who have joined Cruz include Senators Mike Braun, Pat Toomey, Marco Rubio, Todd Young, and Rick Scott. It's the 3rd time Cruz has introduced an amendment to impose term limits. One opponent argued in 2019 that term limits would make it harder for Congress to do its job. And without an election to worry about, lawmakers could be less concerned with the needs of their constituents. Cruz is asking colleagues to submit the amendment to the states for speedy ratification.
The Senate has just confirmed another of President Biden's cabinet members. The new Secretary of State will succeed Mike Pompeo.
We'll engage the world not as it was, but as it is, a world of rising nationalism, receding democracy, growing rivalry from China and Russia and other authoritarian states.
Anthony Blinken will be the new Secretary of State. He'll become the most senior cabinet member and 4th in line of presidential succession. Previously, he served under the Obama administration. On the issue of dealing with communist China, Blinken said he believes President Trump was right to take a tougher stance, but he also says there is still some room for cooperation.
As we look at China, there is no doubt that it poses the most significant challenge of any nation state to the United States in terms of our interests, the interests of the American people. There are, as I see it, rising adversarial aspects to the relationship, certainly competitive ones, and still some cooperative ones when it is in our mutual interest.
Some Republican senators voted against Blinken's confirmation because of his Middle East policy. Senator Rand Paul says the problem he has with Blinken is that Blinken advocates for military intervention in the Middle East.
President Biden signed 4 executive orders related to housing discrimination, imprisonment, and other issues facing minority communities. NTD's Kevin Hogan has more on Biden's remarks.
Housing, for example. Housing is a right in America, and home ownership is an essential tool to wealth creation and to be passed down to generations. Today, I'm directing the Department of Housing and Urban Affairs and Urban Development to redress the historical racism in federal housing policies.
Another one of Biden's executive orders directs the Justice Department not to renew contracts the federal government has with private prisons. This is consistent with his campaign promises. Another one of his orders strengthens ties with Native American tribes.
Today, I'm directing the federal agency to reinvigorate the consultation process with Indian tribes. Respect for tribal sovereignty will be a cornerstone of our engaging with Native American communities.
Biden is attempting to give Native American tribes access to the Strategic National Stockpile so they can get help from FEMA during the pandemic. And he is directing the Justice Department to work with the Asian American and Pacific Islander community to prevent hate crimes associated with the pandemic. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
Former President Trump is seemingly jumping right back into the political scene. He's opening an office of the former president in Palm Beach County, Florida. The move comes amid questions on how Trump will get involved in politics after leaving office. A statement from the office explains it will manage Trump's correspondence, public statements, appearances, and official activities. The office aims to advance the interests of the U.S. and to, quote, carry on the agenda of the Trump administration through advocacy, organizing, and public activism. Twitter has routinely flagged posts for supposedly giving out misinformation, particularly posts about whether there was fraud in the general election. It's now giving that power to certain users. That is, if they qualify. NTD's Dawn Tran talked to some experts about the platform's new feature.
If you're on Twitter, have a verified phone and email, and no history of recent Twitter rules violations, then you're well on your way in joining Birdwatch. It's a new feature on Twitter where users can flag tweets considered to be misleading or false. Twitter said Birdwatch is meant to address the issue of misinformation, but social media professor Andrew Selepak said there's a lot of uncertainty with this new program.
My concern is that what people are going to do is they're going to sit in their echo chamber and they're going to look for things that disagree with what they already believe. So if you're on the political left, you're going to look for comments made by people on the political right and look to kind of moderate their content and suggest corrections and basically flag content. And the same is going to be true for people on the political right who are going to look at content from those on the left.
Senior investigative journalist at the Epoch Times and host of the YouTube channel Crossroads, Joshua Phillip, says he doesn't think Birdwatch will do what it's meant to do, and that Twitter itself is not neutral.
Twitter doesn't really have a, say, bipartisan stance when it comes to allowing news and viewpoints. We saw, for example, even the selective censorship of Trump and other people who support Trump when it comes to, for example, putting warnings on tweets. It does seem to be the case that Twitter is doing this out of very likely political interest or being fair to them. Maybe they're doing it as well because they don't have the ability to moderate content to the degree that they feel they would have to, and so they're recruiting people to basically do it themselves.
During the 2020 election, Twitter reported that it flagged 300,000 tweets, most of them relating to alleged voter fraud. At the same time, the platform said the Chinese Communist regime's posts that denied there's forced labor in Xinjiang province did not violate its rules. Selepak says there are a lot of questions about who will be part of Birdwatch.
The issue is that who are these people that are going to be chosen? Who is going to be allowed to do it? And then what are their backgrounds? Twitter said that they're going to allow different users with different backgrounds, but will we ever see a list of who these people are? Will we ever know how many people there are? There's a lot of questions that still go into of what this is going to be and what the final version of it's going to be.
Phillips says the program will have individuals determining what is true on Twitter.
And for a person to take up something like that, you need to be a person who already has very strong emotions about, for example, stopping what you perceive as misinformation. And unfortunately, the perception of misinformation these days isn't always misinformation itself. It can just be something you disagree with. And so the question is going to be what constitutes truth and what constitutes allowed truth.
Phillips says Twitter's new feature is not so different from actions made by communist regimes in the past. He pointed to communist China in the 20th century, where children reported on their parents, leading to their executions and the children being cast away by the Chinese Communist Party.
The effect of programs like this is people start losing trust in each other, and people start looking out at each other as basically thought police. This is the reality that Twitter is creating. It's recruiting people to become volunteer thought police. And we've seen this happen under many communist regimes in the past, and we've seen the kind of tensions it creates between people. It is a terrible development in our society.
Twitter has, in recent months, expanded a number of its policies to monitor misleading information. The platform also suspended more than 70,000 accounts that were engaged in sharing what they termed harmful QAnon-associated content, which they said were dedicated to the propagation of this conspiracy theory across the platform. Reporting by Don Tran, NTD News.
Coming up, some states are either loosening or planning to ease up their lockdowns. Illinois, for one, has given indoor dining the go-ahead in more of its regions. And California's unemployment benefit system has seen loopholes, particularly with its pandemic funds. The state's labor secretary, Julie Su, said that up to 27% of its claims could be fraudulent. That and more after the break.
Are you looking for a news source that does not spin the truth, doesn't push any false narratives, and instead presents you with the facts and lets you make up your own mind? Then go to readepic.com and try the Epic Times newspaper for yourself. It's pure honest journalism that's based in traditional values.
Officials in some states are either loosening up their virus lockdowns or planning to. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more on those areas and updates on the virus.
From now on, Illinoisans in Chicago and other areas of the state may be eating out more. That's because its Democratic governor gave indoor dining the go-ahead over the weekend. For more than 2 months, this wasn't possible in a number of areas, Chicago included. But there are still limits on capacity. Since early January, the number of positive cases has fallen overall. It last peaked on the 8th, nearly 9,300 cases. Last Friday, about 7,000 new cases and under 100 deaths. Limited indoor dining is also making a comeback in Michigan. Over the weekend, Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer said restaurants can bring in customers to dine in the warmth starting February, day 1. But that call came a little too late for some. The president and CEO of the Michigan Restaurant and Lodging Association says the state lost 3,000 restaurants, with owners hiring 200,000 fewer workers than a year ago. Michigan's confirmed cases have gone down dramatically after peaking in November, reporting less than 2,000 cases daily last week, down to about 1,000 on Friday, and under 50 confirmed deaths last week on a daily basis. In Texas, the Longhorns basketball coach Shaka Smart says he tested positive. He made that announcement on Twitter. Texas's 7-day rolling average of virus cases appears to be going down, now hitting 16,000 cases. As for daily cases, they hit a spike of 25.5 thousand last week, about 18,000 on Friday. Texas has close to 3 times the population of Michigan. Deaths from the virus peaked at around 260 this month. Republican Governor Greg Abbott has said that there won't be more lockdowns in his state. Instead, he's focusing on rolling out vaccines. The Texas Department of Health Services says nearly 1.4 million people have gotten their first dose. and close to 230,000 have been fully vaccinated. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
Up to $30 billion of unemployment benefits could have been exploited in California since last March, with $11 billion already confirmed. The figures come from the agency in charge of giving out the funds. NTD's David Lamb reports.
On Monday, January 25th, the California Employment Development Department, EDD, said that up to $30 billion of its unemployment claims could be fraudulent.
Of the $114 billion in unemployment benefits paid by California since March, approximately 10% have been confirmed as fraudulent. Additional 17% of the paid claims have been identified as potentially fraudulent.
Julie Su, California Labor Secretary, said that the EDD is now working with fraud prevention businesses and law enforcement. Bloomberg reports that President Joe Biden plans to nominate Su to the U.S. Labor Department. EDD estimates that 95% of its fraud comes from crime syndicates taking advantage of the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, PUA. It reported that the PUA did not require income or employment verification upfront for its claims.
EDD is doing everything it can to put money in people's hands who need it. That's a very important goal. But in balancing expedited delivery of benefits, there weren't systems in place to properly mete out fraud. And so they got exploited. I am doing this, and I'm not trying to blame anyone or point fingers at anyone. I am trying to say today, we've got to come up with solutions.
The district attorney said his office is prosecuting 10 people for unemployment fraud, including 2 who opened up a store with the purpose of filing false claims. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
California will be extending its eviction ban for renters and proposed a program to pay off the debt. NTD's Eileen Ang has the details.
Yesterday, Governor Gavin Newsom and lawmakers announced they will extend the current eviction moratorium from February 1st through the end of June this year to protect tenants from being evicted due to financial difficulties during the pandemic. They have agreed to create a program to ensure that $2.6 billion from the state's latest federal stimulus bill will go towards helping renters. It is the first time the state made such an attempt to pay off rent debt. Lawmakers created a bill to facilitate that, called SB 91, or the COVID-19 Relief Tenancy Federal Rental Assistance Bill, and may vote on it this week. They pledged to pay off 80% of unpaid debt if landlords agree to forgive the remaining 20%. If the landlord doesn't agree to forgive the unpaid rent, the program would pay 25% of the rent until at least June 30th. According to the governor's office, these critically needed federal funds targeted to the most at-risk households with unpaid back rent will help tenants stay afloat during and after this pandemic. California renters have accumulated an estimated $1.7 billion of unpaid rent. According to California's EDD data, the state's unemployment rate increased from November's 8.1% to December's 9%, a 0.9% increase. The state lost over 1.4 million jobs over the past year. Despite the loss, California has regained over 44% of the 2.6 million non-farm related jobs that were lost due to the pandemic in March and April. Eileen Ang, NTD News, California.
We're becoming more and more urban. We lose our connection with nature. This little girl lives in a world of natural beauty, nature all around her. Not everybody has this opportunity. Things are growing all around her. All sort of handmade things. The artist has portrayed a scene that is so comforting and so grounded that we can experience this ourselves. The artist himself has to be absolutely natural. And it's not easy to do because children are hard to paint. Birds are hard to paint. They don't sit still. This is quite an accomplishment, reflecting nature back to us. It's just a pure, natural painting.
Trends may be fleeting, but values are timeless. We now bring you this new clothing brand with classic design and luxurious comfort. It's our way of sharing hope and inspiration from the world of Shenyun. We bring you Shenyun Dancer. Wear it with honor.
The former national intelligence chief responds to the new administration's China approach, and an undercover video reveals the Chinese regime's cover-up of the CCP virus. NTD's Tiffany Meyer has more.
Former Director of National Intelligence John Ratcliffe responded to a remark from Press Secretary Jen Psaki. In a briefing, she said the Biden administration would approach China, quote, with some strategic patience. Ratcliffe told Fox News on Monday that existing intelligence supports the Trump administration's tough on China policies. Ratcliffe said, quote, the intelligence doesn't say we should have patience with respect to China. It says we should act with respect to China. An undercover video has caught the public eye. It may shed light on Communist China's reported cover-up of the virus. In it, 2 Wuhan doctors say Chinese authorities knew as early as December 2019 that the CCP virus could be transmitted from person to person, but told medical staff to keep the information quiet. Beijing didn't admit human-to-human transmission was possible until January 20th, 2020. UK media outlet ITV filmed the undercover video as part of a documentary on the virus. The 2 doctors shown in the video are from Wuhan, where the infection is widely thought to have come from. The documentary says the doctors witnessed some of the country's first virus cases. One explained that a relative of someone he knows died from the virus in late December or early January, adding that many of those who lived with the person were also infected. The other doctors said, quote, we knew this virus transmitted from human to human, but when we attended a hospital meeting, we were told not to speak out. The provincial leaders told the hospitals not to tell the truth. The doctors also mentioned authorities knew that 2020's New Year's celebrations would speed up the spread of the virus, but they didn't sound the alarm, allowing scheduled events to go on as planned. That's because, quote, such an event would present a harmonious and prosperous society.
A young man in China dies a slow death after living in severe poverty. His story emerges just weeks after the Chinese Communist Party declared China poverty-free. Hear more from NTD's Don Ma.
Another quiet tragedy has struck China. Weekend news reports detail the death of a young man in China. That's owing to his living in extreme poverty. The circumstances surrounding his death come in sharp contrast to claims made by the Chinese Communist Party, which is that poverty has been eradicated from the country. The young man was in his 20s when he passed away. He had no family due to the deaths of his grandparents and his father's decision to disown him. He endured severe poverty throughout his life. Medical problems made him too weak to work in labor, and he couldn't afford to get an education. With no other options, he took up posting videos online in hopes of making a living. Similar to YouTubers, he called himself Ink T. But unlike mainstream YouTubers, he made very little money from his content creation. Online, he described being unable to afford things most people take for granted. In one post, he wrote about wishing he could eat strawberries, but explained they were too expensive for him to buy. Ink T also had a medical condition to manage, diabetes. Normal treatments mean the condition isn't life-threatening, but unable to afford medical care, his illness worsened to the point where he could no longer eat, a condition that eventually led to his death. His poverty forced him to purchase medicine 1 tablet at a time, as healthcare in the country often excludes the extremely poor. Aware of his own situation, Ink T knew his life was coming to an end. He wrote online that he would cherish the days he had left. China issues commentator and cultural scholar Wen Zhao said Ink T's calm attitude towards death stemmed from acceptance that he faced a hopeless situation. On December 31st, Ink T wrote his last post online, explaining that he was on his deathbed. He passed away in his apartment alone sometime later. Ink T's story comes amid Beijing's claims that poverty no longer exists in China. Last year, Chinese state media claimed that the country's entire population had been lifted out of poverty. Reports went on to say China had achieved a miracle in human history. Ink T's case isn't unprecedented. Another similar tragedy struck last year. That's when a young Chinese woman passed away after living on pennies a day. She died from heart and kidney problems after eating too little food for 5 years. She was so malnourished that at one point she weighed about only 40 pounds. Don Ma, NTD News.
And still to come, Wall Street CEO Leon Black is stepping down over his ties to Jeffrey Epstein. Black gave him a massive amount of money. And Apple issues a warning. It says to keep the new iPhone away from some medical devices.
Is deep-sea fish oil really healthy? Due to pollution in the oceans, most fish contain heavy metal elements and radioactive substances. That's why it's so important to choose a pure source of omega-3. Puritan green vegetable omega-3 is made from purslane and perilla seeds, which are rich in nutrients and minerals, especially vitamins A, D, E, calcium, and iron. With natural processing and no harmful chemical additives, it has more than 90% concentration of omegas 3, 6, 7, and 9. It effectively improves brain power and is beneficial to the heart's health. Puritan omega-3 does not smell of fish and contains no pollutants, so both adults and children can safely and easily consume it over a long period of time. Puritan green vegetable omega-3. Eat 2 a day and you'll feel brand new.
The CEO of Apollo Global Management, Leon Black, is resigning over his relationship with sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. An independent investigation found that Black paid Epstein and his charity $158 million. But it says Black was not involved in any way with Epstein's criminal activities. Black says although he didn't do anything wrong, he regrets being involved with Epstein. Last year, the New York Times reported that Black paid Epstein at least $50 million, even after he was a convicted sex offender. Black founded Apollo along with 2 others 31 years ago. It now manages more than $440 billion in assets. Although he's stepping down as CEO, he will keep his position as chairman of the firm. And General Electric offered an upbeat outlook for its business this year after reporting a surge in quarterly cash flow on Tuesday. Here are the details.
GE's turnaround is gaining steam. The industrial conglomerate reported on Tuesday a big surge in quarterly cash flow that crushed its own expectations and issued an upbeat outlook. General Electric generated $4.4 billion in cash flow in the fourth quarter, and it now sees that totaling $2.5 to $4.5 billion for this year. Investors closely track cash flow because it's seen as a sign of the health of GE's operations and its ability to pay down debt. Wall Street liked what it saw, driving GE shares up nearly 11% in early trading Monday. CEO Larry Culp has been trying to revive the company by improving free cash flow and cutting debt. He said he's seeing momentum across all of GE's businesses. The pandemic slammed its most profitable and biggest cash-generating business, aviation. But with air traffic expected to recover in the second half and Boeing 737 MAX jets return to the skies, GE said its aviation revenue would be flat to higher this year. The 128-year-old company that was once the most valuable U.S. corporation and a symbol of American business might has slimmed down into a company that focuses on jet engines, power plants, and renewable energy.
Apple is warning its customers. It says its new iPhone 12 could interfere with certain medical devices, including pacemakers. The notice specifically warns users about magnets inside all 4 iPhone 12 models, as well as MagSafe charging accessories. Apple recommends keeping iPhones and MagSafe chargers a safe distance from medical devices. It suggests more than 6 inches apart or 15 inches apart when wirelessly charging. Apple didn't immediately respond to a request for comment. However, the Heart Rhythm Journal released a report in early January saying the magnets in the iPhone 12 that make it compatible with MagSafe accessories could interfere with an implanted defibrillator. And up next, the COVID-19 death toll in the UK tops 100,000, and the government is considering introducing mandatory quarantine for some travellers entering the country. And UK lawmakers question the chief executive of Europe's largest bank over freezing a Hong Kong pro-democracy activist's account. He says he's not making a moral judgment. Find out more after the break.
When you look at TV networks in America, a soundbite and fight-it-out culture prevails on news and commentary programs. As a Canadian, I'm fascinated with America, and I wanted to offer American thought leaders an opportunity to share their thoughts in a deep dive format, where we can explore their ideas together. And so American Thought Leaders was born. The world's most brilliant thinkers believed that open discourse was the key to greatness. However, all around the world, we see that discourse is being stifled, and political agendas have subverted media. The Epoch Times launched its Global Thought Leaders program to bring back this great tradition of free thought. As the host of American Thought Leaders, every week I interview some of the most intriguing minds on the most pressing issues of our time. Be sure to check out our new episodes every week.
Thousands of Indian farmers breached a historic complex in Delhi today. Police had just fired tear gas to break up their protest against agricultural reforms.
The farmers are angry about new laws that they say help large private buyers at their expense. The clashes were preceded by a convoy of tens of thousands of farmers driving their tractors through the fringes of the city. They spoke of wanting to reach the capital to get their message to Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
This law is like poison to us. We are not going to accept it in any condition. We request that Modi takes back the laws as soon as possible.
Agriculture employs about half of India's population of 1.3 billion, and unrest among an estimated 150 million land-owning farmers worries the government. The protests pose one of the biggest challenges to Prime Minister Modi since he came to power in 2014.
Over to Europe. The UK COVID-19 death toll surpasses 100,000. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he's deeply sorry for every life lost and takes full responsibility. NTD UK's Neil Woodrow will bring us more news from Europe.
Hello and welcome. The UK government is set to introduce mandatory hotel quarantine for some arrivals after the number of COVID-19 deaths in the UK exceeds 100,000. NTD's Earl Rhodes has more.
The UK reports over 1,600 deaths in the last 24 hours, pushing the death toll to over 100,000. Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he feels deeply sorry for every life lost. Some Londoners seem disheartened by the heavy impact of the pandemic on the country.
It's the whole world's problem now. It's everyone's problem, but you can't help but look at New Zealand, Sweden, and it just feels like we've dropped the ball here. It does feel that way.
I think it's difficult to compare the numbers between countries and everything else, so I just wouldn't want to go into it, but obviously there's devastating numbers and just people need to follow the rules.
Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he's looking at the option of introducing quarantine hotels where travellers would be required to isolate. One Londoner says the government should have done that at the very beginning.
It feels, everything that's being done now feels like the horse has already bolted and now let's stick stuff on like Band-Aids.
A government minister warns the public not to book summer vacations, as they could also face hotel quarantine. One Londoner thinks returning Brits should be allowed home.
I think the 14 days in a hotel is a bit draconian if people have a home to go to.
Reports suggest the proposed quarantine hotel measure will apply to travellers from South Africa and Brazil. Earl Rhodes, NTD News, London.
Police arrest at least 70 people as riots break out for the third night in the Netherlands following the establishment of a nationwide overnight curfew. Joy Duguid brings us the details.
Restaurant owners organised the lockdown protest rally in the Museum Square that sparked the riots. Amsterdam's mayor designated the Museum Square a high-risk zone and gave the police powers to issue fines and preemptively search people for weapons. Mounted police and water cannon were also used for crowd control. Some locals are in shock over the riots.
The lockdown, the curfew, everything that's going on, and especially all the riots here in the Netherlands at the moment. It feels a bit unreal, actually. It feels a bit unreal, like a bad movie.
Well, we're very sorry about it. I mean, that's just not what all of the Netherlands is.
The curfew is the first in the country since World War II and was imposed over fears of a new variant. The numbers of new infections in the Netherlands has been declining for weeks. Some 4,000 new cases were reported on Monday, the lowest since December 1st. Joy Duguid, NTD News.
The European Union is proposing restrictions on COVID-19 vaccines after tensions with AstraZeneca and Pfizer over sudden supply cuts to the bloc. NTD's Marianne Leatham has the story.
AstraZeneca tells the EU that it could not meet agreed supply targets by the end of March, while Pfizer says there will be a temporary impact on shipments in late January to early February. The European Union Health Commissioner calls the clarifications insufficient.
The European Union wants to know exactly which doses have been produced where by AstraZeneca so far, and if or to whom they have been delivered.
According to a report, Sweden is pausing vaccine payments to Pfizer, and Latvia suggests taking the issue to court if necessary. Britain's vaccine deployment minister is more positive about the delivery.
Supplies are tight, and they continue to be, because these are new manufacturing processes. I'm a chemical engineer, as I mentioned earlier. Any new vaccine manufacturing process is going to have challenges. It's lumpy and bumpy. It gets better, it stabilizes and improves going forward.
Vaccine rollouts in the EU have been slow compared to some other countries. Marianne Neetham, NTD News.
Nearly 70 lawmakers from the G7 nations signed a joint letter asking their leaders to unite around a plan of action to confront China. Norbert Röttgen, chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee in Germany's parliament, is one of the main initiators behind the efforts. He wrote on Twitter, "Our primary objective should be clear, acting as one G7 alliance to hold firm in our commitment to uphold the international order while ensuring countries like China play by the rules that they themselves have agreed to." The G7 includes Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the US and the UK. The next summit will be held in June in Carbis Bay in southwestern England. UK lawmakers question HSBC Bank's chief executive and chief compliance officer over the bank's freezing of a Hong Kong pro-democracy activist account. NTD's Eddie Aitken has more.
Chief Executive Noel Quinn tells lawmakers of the UK Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee that freezing the accounts is a requirement from the Hong Kong police that HSBC had to follow. A lawmaker asks if he feels comfortable with the decision.
I am comfortable that we've applied the law as we had to apply the law. I'm not making a moral judgment. It's not my position to make a moral or a political judgment on these matters. I have to comply with the law.
A leaked document reveals at least 335 HSBC employees were members of the Chinese Communist Party. A lawmaker points out it's a legal requirement to have Communist Party branches in businesses in China.
I do not know the political affiliation of any one of the individuals that work for us. It's not something we record on our systems.
last year HSBC's Asia-Pacific chief executive signed a petition backing China's security law in Hong Kong. Quinn says he is just one of the many business leaders that signed the petition, and it's not a political statement. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte hands in his resignation to the head of state, hoping to have an opportunity to put together a new coalition and rebuild his parliamentary majority. Eddie Aitken has the story.
Conte lost his absolute majority in the Upper House Senate last week when a junior partner quit in a row over the government's handling of the pandemic and economic recession.
We will never be complicit in the greatest waste of money we could have in Republican history. If we want to move forward, we have to move forward with a project.
The CCP virus triggered Italy's worst recession since World War II. The government has been struggling to draw up a plan on how to effectively spend some 200 billion euros of EU funds to help the economy recover. Some Rome residents say they hope a solution can be found without an election.
We are very worried. I think, however, that they will find a solution because Italy deserves a good government.
Conte hopes President Sergio Mattarella will give him a mandate to form a new government with broader backing in Parliament. However, if Conte cannot find new allies, Mattarella will have to come up with an alternative candidate deemed capable of piecing together a workable coalition. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
That's all for now. Back to New York.
And next, we'll follow the footsteps of French writer Nostradamus, who is said to read the movement of the stars and even predict the future.
It's just clear as day. The media, whether it's broadcast, cable, or print media, has become extremely biased. And I started looking online for alternative ways to get information. And I saw an ad for a free trial. And I looked at it and I said, Epoch Times. I mean, come on, this is end of days type of stuff. I mean, what are they going to be talking about here? And I said, well, it's a free trial. Let me dig in. Is it giving me both sides? Is it giving me an objective point of view here? I have looked for opportunities to see where they might be biased, and I don't find it. It has given me a level of trust in media that I didn't think I'd ever get back. I love the Epoch Times because it has renewed my faith in the idea that a reliable, responsible, non-biased source of information is available. And I can say that I love it because of that.
Is the future written in the stars? French doctor and writer Nostradamus thought so. Some say he predicted major historical events, including both world wars and 9/11. Our France correspondent David Vives went to the author's hometown to find out more about the mysteries surrounding him.
The life story of French author Nostradamus is out of the ordinary. It all starts in Salon de Provence, where he was born. It was the Renaissance era, and religious faith was a natural part of scientific inquiry. The young Nostradamus studied medicine.
The first book he wrote was on some drugs. It was based on makeup and marmalades.
News of his drug's efficiency spread rapidly. One episode sent his life down a new path. Plagues came to the region in 1546. More than 5,800 people died. Nostradamus wrote about how much it struck him to see dead bodies piling up in the cemetery. But he dared to face plague-stricken people and became the region's top doctor. Contemporaries said Nostradamus successfully helped to quell the epidemic using a powder made of roses picked in the early morning. In his quest to find the origin of human suffering, Nostradamus came across some unexpected answers. Like many of his peers, he used to spend time gazing at the sky.
The study of medicine based itself on the stars. It's important to know that at the time, we thought that a human body is a universe unto itself, and that it is connected to the stars in the universe as we know it. So the stars in the composition of the universe reflects in the action of humans. So as Nostradamus said himself, he just wrote his poem out of divine inspiration.
He wrote his book titled Prophecies in 1546. The book has about 1,000 poems, each one about 4 lines long.
Here, one of the most known prophecies, it's about the death of King Henry II. The king challenged a count to a joust, or spear duel, during a tournament. Despite the advice of the queen, a piece of the spear got through his eyes and he would die from this injury. And hear what Nostradamus wrote 4 years before it happened. The young lion will overcome the older one on the field of combat in a single battle. He will pierce his eyes through a golden cage. 2 wounds made 1. Then he dies a cruel death.
He also predicted tribulations around the year 2000, such as the coming of new plagues, famine, and a third world war. According to this website, out of 1,024 prophecies, 800 can be clearly identified as already having come to pass. Other experts say the book Prophecies is nothing more than poetry. Nostradamus committed himself to write in a mystical way, using obscure terms. He said he did it on purpose because a secret of heaven should not be told to the general public, as if the reader is invited on a journey where he could choose to believe or not. Though many of the prophecies have a dark tone, Nostradamus said suffering is only a piece of the wheel in the star's overall movement. According to one translator of his work, this was Nostradamus' message to keep hope alive. Reporting by David Vives, NTD News.
Engineers working on the dome of Florence's famous cathedral have found paw prints on its roof tiles. So now the question is, how did they get there?
When engineers climbed the scaffolding covering the east side of Santa Maria del Fiore Cathedral, they didn't expect to find evidence of animals from centuries past. The tiles were made in the early 1400s. They were dried outside before being baked in furnaces.
During the drying process at the various Impruneta tile factories, the freshly formed tiles would be left out in the open to dry and could be walked on by farm animals or even wild ones. Foxes, chickens, dogs, cats.
Now experts are mapping them out one by one in a painstaking process. The lead architect in charge of the project says the tiles with prints were not discarded because they posed no problems as far as weight bearing was concerned.
Therefore, not having to support anything, these tiles are acceptable even if they have small, insignificant defects, like these animal prints on the surface.
Recently made tiles are put out to weather on the roofs of the cathedral. This process allows the newer tiles to age, so they blend in. Tourists and Florentines who look will never be able to see the paw marks up close, but they can visit the Cathedral Museum to see original molds and scaffolding used during its construction.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox.
Hi, we're happy to announce that you can also catch us on cable TV now. Millions of households already choose us as one of their trusted news sources, and you can too. You can watch us in Chicago, Washington, D.C., New York, and many other cities as well. And if your system doesn't carry NTD yet, you can just give them a quick call and request NTD on your cable provider. Thank you for watching. See you next time.